Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to start to tackle the idea of what are unwanted intrusive thoughts and why do I have them? A question that most people that are dealing with intrusive thoughts ask potentially over and over and over again, myself included, at times when they've really kind of taken me under, and people that I know and have worked with, obviously. And there's a reason for that. I think that oftentimes when we're dealing with symptoms of sensitization, such as a barrage of unwanted intrusive thoughts. What goes along with that is a what I call sticky brain, kind of inability to let things go. And so the inability to let things go and the inability to really be reassured and for reassurance to really last and be very meaningful, which is why reassurance doesn't work, is because it's actually not a super helpful thing when you're in an anxious state, which is primarily what you're dealing with when you're dealing with unwanted intrusive thoughts that are causing you a great deal of anxiety and distress. These things become like a hamster wheel, become like a negative cycle, and we seek more reassurance. We want to understand why am I thinking this? What does this mean? Why would I even be having these weird thoughts? So let's start to break that down a little bit, okay? Because the reality is we're not unique. The average human is said to have between 50 and 70 thoughts per day. If you're listening to this playlist, this station, chances are you're on the high end of that 70,000, and I would venture to say it's much higher than that. And that's because you're probably somebody who by nature has always maybe been a little bit more of a fixer, a problem solver, a hole plugger, somebody who's been a little bit more analytical. You assess things, you map things out, you review things, you mentally review things, you're highly reflective, maybe at times to the point of your detriment. And I'd imagine you're also probably somebody who on some level has quite a good imagination, maybe is even a little creative, and is of high intellect. These are some of the traits of people that tend to get snared by not only unwanted intrusive thoughts, but other manifestations of anxiety when they come, or of a mind that's kind of, gone a little bit off the rails and is playing some tricks on us. We tend to get snared. Those of us with fixing mentalities, doing mentalities, problem-solving mentalities, plugging hole mentalities, we tend to get snared more than most people. And because we're used to being able to figure things out, we're able to fix things for everybody else, we're able to think our way through things. When we get snared, again, today we're talking about intrusive thoughts primarily, but when we get snared by these things, we can't understand why more thinking is actually making it worse. And that's exactly what happens. So why do we have them? Why do certain people get snared with them more than others? Well, the reality is, again, we all have them. So unwanted intrusive thoughts. Not all thoughts are intrusive. Some thoughts we call up. I'm going to decide to study for an exam. I'm going to decide to think about my mom's upcoming surgery. I'm going to decide to sit down and watch this TV show. I'm going to decide what I'm going to eat for lunch. Okay. But outside of that, if you really think about it, most of our thoughts are somewhat intrusive, right? They're just kind of happening. So intrusive doesn't quite cover it. It's the unwanted part. It's the stuff that comes in and goes, ugh, like, why did I think that? I was having a perfectly good lunch with my loved one. Why did I suddenly start to worry that maybe I have stomach cancer? I was having a really good time out for a walk and it was a beautiful day. And all of a sudden I began to think about a loved one and their addiction issues. And now I can't stop thinking about that. And I should really go home. And I haven't heard from them for a few days. Oh my God, what if something's happened to them? And boom, 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 right? Unwanted intrusive thoughts would be something like, well, again, we have them all the time. The problem is that when you have a nervous system that's really quite let's call it insulated. It's resilient and insulated. It has a lot of bounce back to it. We can let these thoughts kind of come and go. Sitting at I've talked about this before, sitting at a crosswalk or sitting in your car at a crosswalk, and the thought comes through, oh my God, if I just put the gas on, I could plow down through 15 people, right? we don't usually get scared by that. Most of us don't need to pull the car over and call somebody and say, you better come get me. I'm about to kill 15 people. Most of us are just like, well, that was weird. Or why did I just have that weird sexual image flash? Or why did I just have that, weird thought about something I haven't thought about in 30 years? Why did that, I smelled a raspberry and suddenly I'm transported back to being 10, picking raspberries with my aunt. Oh my God, remember that time my aunt, had the grasshopper go up her leg and she thought it was a snake and you freak. Okay, boom, 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 right? So it's a lot of times we are not really running the show. The brain has kind of just gone off on its own and is taking us down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. But again, in a well-insulated nervous system, we don't really care. Think about how many times you've been driving your car down a familiar route, 20-minute ride, and you're just lost in reverie. You're just in thought. You don't even really know what you're thinking about. And suddenly you pull up in your driveway. Well, where have you been for the last 20 minutes, right? Is that dissociation? No, not necessarily. It's just you're kind of caught in the reverie of thought. You've gone down different rabbit holes. You're not having to think about, put the car in drive, push my foot down on the gas, now put the brake on, now put it in park. No, you're just doing these things automatically. And while you're doing them automatically, you're probably lost in thought with a whole lot of other things. Some of it could be really fun stuff. What if I win the lottery? Some of it could be by the time you get home when you pull in your driveway, you've been lost in the reverie of, I haven't heard from my son in 2 days. Oh my God, what if something's happened to him? Okay. So again, this happens for all of us. The problem comes in when we start to get too focused on these unwanted intrusive thoughts. And a lot of times they come with a whoosh, or sometimes I'll even call it like a, argh. What I mean by that is making a face like I'm slamming on the brakes. So a lot of times people will remember a before and an after. Like, hey, I was coasting along in life, and all of a sudden I had this thought, what if I stab my dog with this knife? Argh, whoosh. And from then on, I've been struggling with really screwed up intrusive thoughts. I can't get these things out of my head. Okay, so why would that happen? Why would we be able to tolerate them through most of our lives or in different ways and then suddenly not be able to? Or why have we potentially been grappling them? Maybe they started in puberty. Maybe they started as a little kid. So what's going on there? The why to me is a lot less important than the how, okay? Because no matter what brings you to the party, right? Whatever date brought you to the party, you're going home the same way. And that's what's most important as far as I'm concerned. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is basically that once you realize that you're grappling with unwanted intrusive thoughts, and thoughts more importantly that are stuck, things you don't want to be thinking about that now you can't stop thinking about. Now you're afraid of why you're thinking that thought, right? And, as you are more likely then to get caught up in it, as you start to slow down and look at it, am I a monster? Am I a pervert? Am I violent? What kind of person would think that? Again, we all think all kinds of things. Think about Stephen King, right? Look what that guy's coming up with, right? I don't think he's sitting around just like in the corner of his closet thinking, oh my God, how in the hell did I think about, the dude in The Shining? How did I come up with that? Or, oh my God, why did I think about Carrie? Or, oh my gosh, why am I thinking about Cujo? Or, no, he's just going with his imagination and thinking, wow, my brain's coming up with all kinds of weird stuff, violent stuff, all that kind of stuff, right? So again, we're able to access that. We have highly imaginative minds, but sometimes we get scared. And I think a big part of it has to do with the level of sensitization. Okay, so for example, let's say you're going into to see Wicked in New York. I'll use that as an example. And it's been really cold. You're there in the wintertime, and you've got all these big jackets on, and maybe you've gone to eat a meal, and you've eaten this big meal before you go see Wicked, and maybe you decided to have a cocktail or two, right? And now you finally get there. You're so excited, and you get into your seat right in the middle of the aisle, and you're still in your big giant jacket. You've got to get it off because now you're starting to get a little hot. And you're so excited, but man, it's loud in here, and the music's loud and you've got great seats. Then all of a sudden you realize like, wow, I kind of have to go to the bathroom and I'm kind of hot and that food's not sitting really well with me. And I'm just stuck in the middle of this row and I'm in the second aisle. If I get up, I'm going to make a scene. Oh my God, I'm trapped. And all of a sudden you maybe feel your heart start to race or palpate, or maybe you start to feel short of breath, or like, what if I throw up? What if I pass out? And now suddenly you're not watching Wicked. Now you're watching yourself, right? So you've had maybe a thought, maybe a sensation, whatever, but all of a sudden you've turned inward. You've started to stare at it rather than being like, oh, let's just take the jacket off, sit back, focus on what I'm here to see. Turn my eyes outward onto the show of Wicked. But what happens to folks when they begin to start to look at their unwanted intrusive thoughts and give them a lot of attention is they turn inward. They move away from the external world, right, where we're supposed to be engaged in our moment-to-moment lived existence, and suddenly, boom, they're staring at themselves. Why would I pick up a knife and think about hurting my dog? I'm a monster. Oh my God, what if I actually did that? What if I hurt my dog? I better get rid of my dog. Should I get rid of my dog? Should I even be allowed to have pets? Maybe I should have somebody take the knives away. And it grows. Okay? Again, whatever we're watering grows. If you're watering the weeds of your mind, right? Which is just the superfluous stuff that comes out there, it's going to grow, right? So why do you have it to begin with, though? Like I said, well, first of all, you're no different than anybody else. But some people would say to me, that's not true, Jen. Not everyone thinks about stabbing their dog. Okay, well, maybe not. But maybe you saw a movie when you were 10 and that happened. Maybe you heard somebody talk about weird thoughts and you remember that one. It doesn't matter, but what does matter is that it's gotten you hooked. And we're more prone to get hooked when we're sensitized, right? So for example, going back to my Wicked example, that person was kind of hot, they were full, their stomach was full, they were a little intoxicated. All of a sudden, they'd always been a little claustrophobic. Now they're feeling like they're trapped in this thing, right? And all of a sudden, all these factors start to come together and it pulls them inward. And suddenly they're just trying to survive the 2.5 hours of Wicked to get the hell out back into the cold streets of New York where they're maybe safe and out of that place of, oh my God, what if I faint? What if I pass out? What if I throw up, right? Which again, are all what ifs. They're all unwanted thoughts. They're all worry thoughts, but they feed off themselves. So, but let's go back to the why for a second. What I believe is happening for folks that really grapple with this and struggle with this and find themselves locked in their brains, mentally reviewing and trying to get away from their thoughts is, and I actually believe this to be true of people that have all kinds of other types of anxious symptoms, is that we're dealing with a limbic system. Now, I don't want this to turn into a big, talk about neuroscience and neuroanatomy, but what makes up the limbic system? Well, the thing you're going to probably know the most is going to be the amygdala, but it's the anterior cingulate cortex for those of you that want to know, the orbital frontal cortex, the cingulate gyri, the hippocampus, the thalamus, the basal ganglia, all these different parts make up what we call our limbic system. Our limbic system, which is part of our nervous system, right, which is a part of our brain, is responsible for emotion, memory, our threat response, our sorting functions, all of that. It's also our most primitive part of our brain. Okay, it's the part that you find in fish and reptiles and amphibians, all mammals, okay? And it's the part of our brain that was probably the most developed. It was probably the biggest part of our brain back in the early days when, we were maybe living off the land. And again, it wouldn't have served us to hear a thundering roar and think, wow, there must be 5,000 bunnies hopping my way, right? That we wouldn't have survived, right? So that threat response system, our limbic system, was probably big and robust and said, run, or pick up a stick, or get ready to fight, or get ready to flee, or get ready to roll over in your belly, right? The freeze response. Or the fawn response, get ready to play nice. Now that wouldn't have worked so well in the old days, but nowadays fawning as a threat response, get ready to play nice, be nice, so that you get out of danger, right? But anyway, my point is that this evolution, this primitive part of our brain, part of our makeup, was robust. And what's happening now is we live in a world where we're not trying to fight off wildebeests and wondering if we keep the fire going because we're going to go, we're going to freeze at night, or we're going to be starving to death, or most of us are not living in that world. But we still have this part of our brain that we hope, in a non-sensitized nervous system, is working on our behalf. Threats come in, threats go out. Have you ever almost hit a car or almost got in a car accident and you feel the whoosh, you feel the adrenaline whoosh, and maybe even get a little bit like stars, and maybe your ears ring a little bit, and you have a little trouble breathing for a minute, and then all of a sudden, boom, it goes back down, right? Your threat response was activated, and then it comes back to baseline. Well, what happens to people that get more and more sensitized is that threat response system goes up and it doesn't come down very easily. And part of why it doesn't come down very easily is because our reaction to it. And that's why I said whatever date brought you to the dance, the way you're going home for everyone is the same. So what does that mean? It means that if you are plagued by unwanted intrusive thoughts, they could be anything. And I listed those in my first clip on here. It could be anything from what if I'm going crazy to what if I don't heal to what if this is cancer to what if I hurt my child, why am I having these weird perverted thoughts about, somebody I shouldn't be thinking about that way? Am I a sicko? Am I a pervert? What if I'm mentally ill? What if they lock me up? What if I tell somebody and they run away? What if I lose my job? It could be anything, right? So once you're there and you've gotten to the dance and you're at the dance of unwanted intrusive thoughts, and now you've turned inward and you're staring at them, this is where we go wrong. This is where we start to entertain, try to get to the bottom of them, try to figure them out. We try to assess it, analyze, we try to rationalize. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't hurt my dog. I love my dog. Let's think about all the times I've had dogs. I'm 53. I've had dogs since I was 2. See, I wouldn't hurt a dog. If I would have hurt a dog, I would have hurt a dog before. All of that noise and nonsense and all that entertaining of the thought and all of that rationalizing and justifying. Or I pick up the phone and I call my mom and say, Mom, I had thought about hurting a dog. I wouldn't hurt a dog, right? No, honey, you'd never hurt a dog. Hang up the phone, you feel better. See, I wouldn't hurt a dog. Until, boom, but what if? I don't know. People start hurting dogs when they're 53. That could happen, right? This is now the sign of a sensitized nervous system, an over-anxious brain, and it's the product of too much entertainment, of things that were meant to kind of come and go. Weird fumes off a hot furnace. Claire Weeks, who I'll talk about at some point in one of these videos, because she's really the matriarch, I think, of nervous system sensitization and disordered anxiety, but gets very little credit these days for that. Talks about they're nothing but strange thoughts in a tired mind. And the problem is what we tend to do when we get scared of our strange thoughts is we further exhaust our minds and our nervous systems by all the entertaining and attending and reassurance seeking and avoiding. What if I pass out I thought I was going to pass out at Wicked. I better never go back to the Broadway show again. And then boom, maybe I better not even go back to New York. Man, the last time I was in New York, I felt really funky. I better not go back to New York again. And all of a sudden our world can start to become really, really small. So what are unwanted intrusive thoughts? They're thoughts that happen to everybody. They're thoughts that occur to everybody. But as we're hopefully, again, walking through the world with robust, resilient, not exhausted, worn out, burned out nervous systems, they flow through us. That was weird. Whatever. I'm not going to push that person off the subway. I'm not going to jump off this cliff. I'm not going to hurt my dog. All right, that's weird to think about my loved one in a weird, sexual, perverted, violent way, but I'm not, that's just, so what? It's junk. And that's what it is. It's junk. The problem is, we move into like Sanford and Son and become junk collectors, and start going through the junk in our mind and giving it meaning and building stories around it. And the more we do that, the more importance we give it, the more of a narrative we give it, the more it's going to stick around. Now, why is it going to stick around? Why wouldn't it just leave us alone? Well, because that limbic system, that part of the brain I was talking about, it doesn't speak English or Spanish or French or anything like that. It does not speak the language that we speak out of our mouths, right? It speaks the language of action and behavior. So what do we tend to do when something scares us? We tend to freeze up. We tend to run. We clench our hands. We clench our teeth. We start breathing fast. We isolate. We avoid. We seek reassurance. Any of these things, right? And our limbic system, our brain, it's watching us. And it's saying, ooh, Jen's scared. I must be onto something. I better send more of those thoughts because I'm onto something. I've got her attention. All that limbic system, all our brain is concerned about. It does not give a shit, excuse my language, if we are happy, joyful people that are loving going to see Wicked in New York. It does not care about that, okay? It cares about keeping us alive. It's concerned about keeping us vertical and breathing and alive. That's it. It's survival. So when we have now started to feed the beast a little bit, we've gotten ourselves into an anxious state, and we're now, attending to all of the junk in our minds, and we're further perpetuating this cycle, right? Because it's going to kind of give us more. It's going to look at our behavior. It's going to look at our need to pick up the phone and ask for reassurance 10 times, our calling out sick from work because, we can't get out of our heads, being afraid to be around people or places or situations because it's going to trigger a weird thought, right? And that limbic system is going to keep giving us more of the same. Why? Because all it's interested in is it going to keep us alive? Jennifer seems concerned about this. So I better keep this on front and center stage for her so that she's not in any danger. So again, when I said, I don't care what brought you to the dance. I don't care if you've been dealing with this for 20 years, 30 years, or it just started last week. If you're dealing with looping, unwanted, intrusive thoughts that are scaring you, you've now turned inward and are fighting these thoughts and spending time with them, and now the rest of your life is shrunk and you're living in fear. And now you're dealing with all the accordant weird feelings that come with it, the depression that can come with it, the dreeps, that's what I call the creeps, and depression and dread and doom and gloom, and just anxiety and panic that can come with all of this. Now you're living in all of this and you're thinking, gosh, now I'm not even thinking about anything and I just feel all these bad feelings. But then what do? We add thoughts to that too. What if this never goes away? What if I never can feel joy again? What if I could never be around that person again? Or what if I could never go to work again? What if this takes me under? What if I go crazy? What if I end up in a mental institution? What if I die, right? So again, here we are back in the loops of the whiffs. Screw the whiffs. This is the whole point of the channel. So again, whether you've been, kind of came into this world with an anxious sensitivity and vulnerability and have always dealt with being more of a worrywart and all of these things, and now it's just kind of gotten a little bit more out of control, or it's somebody that you've always been again a doer, a fixer, a problem solver, but all of a sudden now you're all your tools have become weapons. Whatever brought you to the dance, we're all getting out of it the same way, and that's what we're going to focus on next time. How do we get out of this? What do we do? Because that's really what matters, right? You don't need a lesson in neurochemistry or neuroanatomy. It's interesting at best, maybe not even be interesting for you. What most people want is, now what? My world is getting small. I've lost my joy. I don't feel like myself. I've lost my confidence. I'm anxious as hell. I'm scared of my own mind and my body. I can't stop thinking these thoughts. What if I can't stop thinking these thoughts? What if this never goes away, right? But the big question is how, and that's what we're going to tackle next. So thanks for checking in, guys, and I'll post again soon.